United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a report out of closed session tonight. In closed session, by a vote of 5-0, the board took action to accept the resignation of classified employee number 760-0000769 in lieu of termination. We need a motion, please, to adopt the agenda. So moved. Second. Are there any changes or additions in the agenda?
Yes.
So on the personnel report, we have two corrections to dates. On page 21, you'll see mid-martial. The effective date in the personnel report says September 1, but we need to change that to June 23rd, which actually began that work prior. And then on the following page, page 22 for Triana Ramazan, it's the same issue. So rather than September 1st, that should reflect June 23rd.
Thank you. All those in favor of the agenda as amended? Aye. Aye. Carries 5-0. Okay, we have no recognitions this evening, so we move to public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone here to speak on that? No? Okay. We move to the reports, and we have reports from the group from committee.
There's no microphone up there.
Okay, I'll just stay right where I am.
You unmute it.
We are excited to return to school. It was fun to be up at Thurston today for the training, and I feel like everyone had a really positive response to the unconscious bias training that we've begun up there, and I feel like it's everyone recognizes it's so important right now in light of everything that's going on, and we're hopeful that it will make a real impact in our district for our staff and our students, so that's great. I loved seeing the B Thurston up at Thurston today and talked to Jenny a little bit about what that meant, and it just made me excited for the start of the new school year, and we're excited to have our new principal at the high school. I think everyone's looking forward to being back and getting busy, and the best part is when the kids get there, so it's fun to get ready for that.
Margaret for CSEA.
Yes, good evening. I will, as you know, as I spoke last time, I went to Las Vegas to the CSA conference. It was quite a long conference with a lot of resolutions. Of course, the major thing that we all have our antennae up for is the Supreme Court ruling on the Jaris case. And along with that, CSEA decided to increase their dues. So it's an interesting situation, and I only bring that forward because with an increase in dues and also where this case may eventually land, it may change the complexion of who belongs to and who doesn't belong to associations within or with districts, but in all unions. So just an interesting thing that we are very attuned to. On Friday, we'll have the orientation of our new employees, but specifically, again, the classified, and I would like to commend again our administrators. We have been doing this for years. It's something that we started a while back. CSEA just voted that it is mandatory that every school district provide orientation for their classified employees. And when I got the call from our labor rep, we have to set this up, don't worry, we've got it all set up. It's been going on for years. We do it twice a year. So again, I applaud our direction and where we go and being ahead of what the requirements are meant to be. And with that, on our site reps, I've been, appointing people, and the goal is to actually train them. It's a novel idea. And so we tried to do that last year, but it just didn't come about with many things. So the goal will happen after our business meetings, along with our labor representative and myself. We will be doing mini 45-minute or so synopsis trainings of what our goals are for so that the site reps can actually be part of the discussion when little issues or questions come up that you don't always have to call HR. And to be really informed of our contract, I know you love that. So that is part of the goal that will definitely proceed this year because it's needed. needed for me also, because, you know, who else gets the call? So I wanna start at the grassroots and let those people take ownership of their sites. The other thing is, so that's basically it. We have our agenda in place, and we look forward to starting the school year. I'm also attending the unconscious bias training, and very interesting.
One question. Sure. Regarding the Supreme Court thing, so if people choose not to join the union, like, and it would affect you as well, Mindy, then would your labor rep not have to represent them?
Oh, yes.
So they would lose any advantage?
No, they would be represented.
Still,
Even if they
yes,
don't,
even if they don't participate?
yes, so that's why they raised the dues in figuring if they'll have some more money, because CSEA tends to lose about, I hear any number from $8 to $24 million, because, you know, we have a large operation and staff that CSEA employs. So yes, we would have to still provide that. The only difference is if they don't belong to the chapter, our executive board does not have to be involved in any discussions or representations. So that would put major delays on, you know, of an issue that comes up, and then how long does it take before we get a labor rep on site that can help?
Thank you.
That's not the same as for us. So CTA, if you're not a member, because right now we have people who are fair share payers, they're not members. So if something comes up, I don't know if I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, then CTA would not represent them.
So, okay, so that is different.
But they do pay their fair share.
But right now they're having to pay fair share, but what's happening is it's going to court saying they wouldn't have to pay that anymore.
And they
Which
would
in theory, more people might choose not to be members of the union.
Is that a part?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's-
I don't think we have any organization reps here tonight. So we have, any board members who attended anything, except for Kevin, who's gonna report on.
Okay, but should we do the
She
urban,
didn't send me any.
no, but should we do the urban legend, Indians?
You do it.
Okay, so we started out the meeting and Martha, one of our board members was like, oh, so I was talking to somebody, a retired teacher, and she said, you know, Laguna's having a hard time keeping principals, because obviously Jason's here and you know, we got this one from Dana Hills, and I'm worried about it. And I'm like, oh really, why? Martha said, why? And she said, well, you know, the reason is because the place is haunted. It's on the high school's haunted. It's on an Indian burial ground. Jan and I are like, what? Anyway, so that was just for anyone's edification who might need, that was how our meeting started.
She's a sage person.
So just in case, we'll say.
Did you say it? Yeah, say that often.
Just thinking,
It's
you
not
know,
gonna hurt.
just thinking. I got your back, that's, just wanted you to know. Actually,
chanting.
it was, and we just thought that was quite funny. It was a good meeting. We've been working to get CTA integration with community college and that sort of thing, and it's just not as smooth as we had hoped, mostly because of coding issues and, you know, double dipping and not double dipping, but do you want this on your permanent transcript, do you not, you know, things, and just natural, normal things that, you know, come up, and so looking at that, they will have 15 new science labs, or STEM labs in various locations across that we've paid for.
New culinary labs that Ken is moving in.
Yes, I can't wait to get on the second grade at culinary lab. They also, we are without, should the grant, the 3-year grant not be renewed through the state, and we've added so many programs, we have to look at what we'll be able to maintain, or, you know, we won't be able to add. And so it's a concern, so if anybody has any, you know, pull with any legislators, being able to say that if CTE is in fact a direction we wanna go, somebody's gotta help fund it. Because the districts are already, you know, pushed to the limit, and the CCA especially has used everything they've got, and in a wise fashion, I think, we've done a good job. If anybody's interested, I pulled out what we're offering on campus and then what's available off campus. So, and Victoria can print it out or copy it and give it to you all if you wanna look at it. has any interest, we have the draft of the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant and the new one that they're looking at, so Victoria, I don't know if anybody has any interest or whatever, we can put it in, put that in, yeah. Other than that, we meet again on October 19th, I believe, so.
And they did hire back another position.
Oh, yes.
When they split up and they thought that they would not need any of the former ROP veteran employees, that this is another time where they, so the capital employees weren't able to have enough time to do the work. And so they,
So the hire, a lot of people that were let go have now been rehired, which
they
is.
found out that that was something that.
Because it's such a vibrant program, you need to have people to run it, and so it's makes sense, so. Anyway, just put it on something else.
Along with dual credit.
Yeah.
Aren't a couple of people going to a conference about that?
Could be, I mean,
Conferences
our
and-
teachers have some, if we did, I'm not.
On the CTE
I think,
specifically.
well, no, on the junior college credits.
Yes, so we have staff attending a conference on articulation.
Yeah.
Again, as Kat mentioned, there are a lot of challenges with that for a variety of reasons. Credit is one of them, how to articulate
And
credit.
do you want it,
And
so,
some of them, some of the parents of students didn't want them to have it on the college
Because they
grade,
didn't- yeah.
because they weren't getting a top grade.
yeah, so if you're getting a C, and even though you're getting college credit, they didn't want it on their transcript, because it's still a C. And so, and if you're getting college credit, it stays on the transcript. So there's two ways to do it, one, anyway,
So do you have a choice?
no. It's something that we will let the professionals work through.
Yeah, so we have several staff going to that, just to hear how
Yeah.
teachers are doing it. We've had a lot of interest expressed by our local community colleges to continue to work to articulate with them.
They're really excited.
They're very excited, but we wanna make sure it's done the right way.
It's your turn, so it's good.
Yeah, there you go,
Turn it
turn
on.
So, well, since we last met, which it's been a while, as a formal board meeting, we've had a workshop last week, so again, appreciate the board for their time there. And felt like it was a nice day, and we were able to spend a little bit of time on strengths, which is something that we continue to see throughout our work this year, focusing on how we can grow as an organization using strengths as our area of focus. We had our leadership team meeting last week. I have to say, we have a very highly competitive group of individuals. We had a little afternoon competition, and it was a little warmer than I think both Victoria and I were expecting outside. And there was a lot of folks that were very tired and very excited to get into air conditioning and some water at the end of it. But I had a great event. And I have received a lot of positive feedback about that event as well. And just thank my leadership team. Just have a great group of folks who are here and ready for the year and are excited about next week and getting next week kicked off with our welcome back breakfast. And our focus on the day after will be school culture by design, and we have speakers coming in to work with our staff at each individual school site, which is quite a change from what we've done in past practice. And we're hopeful that it will really energize our positive relationships amongst our staff, which will then play out in our positive relationships with our students. And it'll be a focus for us this year is relationships with our students and staff. We all know it's all about relationships, and we also are looking at continuous improvement as another area that we're very highly focused on. We're always striving to be better, and we will continue to do that work. And one last thing that stands out is the phrase "every student, every day" is a big theme for us this year. And simple, but really to the point, and I think it matches our vision and mission. And as we discussed last week in our workshop, those are powerful things for us as an organization to consider moving forward as areas for growth. So with that, again, excited to get the year kicked off, and I know the staff is as well. And the folks to my left have a lot of other updates as well, so I'll refer to them.
So we've been doing a lot of hiring. Now that the principals are back, I wanted to say kudos, thank you for all the work they've been doing with interviews. Last week, we spent 3 days with our principals and assistant principals interviewing potential substitutes. And so we had probably our largest group ever since I've been here, participate in orientation yesterday. As many of you who walked through noticed, we had about 50 people for orientation. So we were able to get many of them processed yesterday. So we're excited about that. We have new employee orientation this Friday, and I know that many of you are out of town, but don't fret because we will be introducing all of those new employees at the Welcome Back breakfast on Tuesday. And I think that's it.
As you know, we have a lot of new faces in business services, but the entire team did a great job this summer coming together real quick to accomplish a lot of things. One of the highlights is we recently closed our books. We're preparing our actuals and getting ready to kick off the school year on a great note. I'd like to thank Ryan Zeta, who's in the audience there. He took on quite a few projects this summer, and so our sites look amazing. Coming in that organized and that efficient has really helped us. Not just continue the work that we've done, but actually improve it. I'd also like to mention that we're very happy that we're 92% done with the big Schneider Electric Energy Efficiency Project. So you'll see that reflected tonight in one of the consent items for a very large check that we're going to give to Schneider, but that represents 92% of that project done. And so I'm happy to report that all of our lights district-wide are now LED, all the mechanical units are done and more efficient at Thurston and the high school that we have promised. We are waiting on installing the theater HVAC unit and the Duggar Gym HVAC unit. Those are the last two outstanding items for them. So it's been a great summer, and thanks to you for allowing us to do our reorg because it shows. We came together and we're having a lot of fun, which is, it's hard to believe in a business office, but there's actually a lot of laughs, so thank you.
So they did a lot of, Snyder did a lot of work this summer.
A lot, they did a lot of it last school year in off hours, so a lot of us didn't see them, but they worked till about 11 o'clock at night. We were sure to maintain within the noise ordinance, so anything loud we didn't do any time after 7.
Hi, good evening. I would like to acknowledge the Instructional Services Department. They are busy preparing for teachers and our classified folks that are coming to our August PD Day. Getting data confirmation of the out the door. We've just got an extraordinary team, so I'm pleased to get the opportunity to work with them. I'd like to acknowledge both Mindy and Margaret for their support with unconscious bias. That it was the first day of our training. Snacks provided by our bargaining unit, so we appreciate that support. Our gate committee's been busy working on multiple measures for identification. Our elementary assessment group has been working on universal screenings to go along with the dyslexia guidelines. So we've got a lot of irons in the fire, but we've got the right people, so we're really pleased and thank you for your support.
Thank you. Okay, the consent calendar is up next. Anyone have an item that they wish to pull? Okay. Then I would ask for a motion on items A through O. Okay. Carol and Keta, are there any minor questions on any of these items? Jeff, did you want to point out that the one on the plumbing, no, it's actually a question that you mentioned at agenda planning,
Sure.
in case that anyone noticed. Doheny.
As you know, we have our own in-house plumber, and so we haven't had a check to an outside plumbing contractor in a very long time. In this instance, we do to Doheny Plumbing, but that is a result of some work that was done by some furniture installation companies last summer that damaged one of our water pipes in the building. So even though we are paying Doheny Plumbing, we are billing that furniture company back for that amount. So there's still no outside plumbing costs for it.
Thank you. In case anyone notices an asterisk, since I know we have an in-house plumber, I appreciate that. Okay, no further questions, and all those in favor of the consent calendar? Aye. Opposed? Carries 5-0, thank you. We have a couple of information items tonight. The first one is a presentation on California Schools dashboard and local indicators. Alicia.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Amy Clan up to the front. She has a presentation of our local indicators for the dashboard. As a reminder, there are state and local indicators. Amy will do a presentation on the local indicators.
Good evening. Board
members and esteemed guests. I'm gonna give you a little overview of our state and local indicators. I believe that you all saw a copy of this in the board update, but we also have some more copies over there, if anybody wants one. So the state has come up with a new way to show exactly how schools are doing. Instead of having just one number, the API score, we look at a variety of different ways to determine how schools are doing, from attendance to test scores to college and career readiness. And so the state came up with several local indicators, or with several state indicators, and then they came up with local indicators that districts will provide their own data and information for. There it goes. So the purpose of the dashboard really is to let the public know how our schools and our school districts are doing. It gives a nice, colorful overview of how we're doing in all of these different areas. And this thing hates me. So the state decided to use little pie charts and colorful pie charts to show how school districts are doing. And they used pie charts, in case anybody was wondering, because some school districts maybe can't afford color printers. So the pieces in the pie, they're not Trivial Pursuits pieces. The pieces in the pie indicate what level a school district is in if your school district doesn't have a color printer. So blue then is, blue then means that your district is doing very well. Green, you're meeting the proficiency standards, and then it goes down to orange, or to yellow, orange, and red. On the state indicators, we are in the blue and green across the board. We have a few areas where some of our subgroups are not in the blue or green, and we're focusing on those different areas. But overall, for ELA and math, we're blue, so we're in the top level. Same thing with graduation rate, and then our English learner progress and our suspension rates were in the green, and those are some of the areas, especially with our suspension rates, where we have some subgroups that aren't in the blue or green. So we're gonna need to look at those areas and make sure that that we're getting those levels, we're progressing in those areas. So we don't have dashboard information available for chronic absenteeism and college and career readiness yet. Chronic absenteeism is supposed to be coming out in the fall. And then college and career readiness, they are putting a lot of different pieces into that. So it's how well the students do on EAP tests, and if they're doing dual enrollment or articulated classes. There's a bunch of different pieces that are involved in that. So they're kind of keep pushing that one back a little bit. So we'll see when that one comes out. So then the state decided that we should use our own data to do local indicators. And those local indicators, it's because the state doesn't really have data for things like it doesn't have really good, strong data for things like basic services. So are all of our teachers credentialed and highly qualified to teach different subjects? Or how are we implementing the state standards? Do we have enough curricular materials to cover in all of the areas to cover the state standards, and then things like parent engagement and school climate. So the state decided to have school districts report their own data for these and then upload it into the school dashboard system. And in order to do that, we rate ourselves using our own data on whether we have met a standard, not met a standard, or then not met a standard for 2 or more years. In order to get met, one of the other things is that we have to present these and get them approved by our local school board. So that's why we're here tonight, is to present the data that we have come up with and ask for you to approve these local indicators so that we can place them on the dashboard for public viewing. This year, the dashboard is a pilot program. So school districts are not required to put this data up, but school districts are highly encouraged to do this for the pilot year. And so we want to make sure that we're part of that pilot and that we have a chance to get our data up there this year, kind of tweak it any way that we need to so that we're completely ready to go for the full implementation year, which will be next year, the 17-18 school year. So the first local indicator is for basic services. These are things like appropriately assigned teachers, access to curriculum. Our curriculum is aligned to the California state standards. And in looking through our data on our school accountability report cards for our highly qualified teachers, all of our different adoptions, the fact that we do have materials that are standards aligned for math right now. We just purchased them or getting them all together for ELA, and then we're moving ahead towards looking at science and social studies. So in this category, we are rating ourselves as net because we do have highly qualified teachers and standards aligned instructional materials.
You had said for fully implementation 17-18, did you mean the data from this year?
The data from this year is for 16-17, so we're approving the local indicators for 16-17 for last year. We're saying this is how we did last year.
And that's the
pilot.
Okay.
For full implementation in the spring, we'll be approving the local indicators for 17-18.
And those three are the only basic services that we look at.
For basic services, this is what the state has said the standard is. So they put together standards that we're supposed to meet, and so these are the indicators for basic services.
I didn't know if there was a list that we picked those from, or if
They came up with the list for us. Even though it's local, they came up with those things for us.
The State Board of Education created the local indicators and said, these are the things that need to be included. Right. So local control, here's your local indicator, and a self-reflection tool
Yes.
that you must use to determine where you are in
Right.
compliance with those. So
your local indicator.
So, right, with your local indicator. So the self-reflection tool actually guides this process. So it's not arbitrary. So we use the self-reflection tool to kind of gauge where we are at using that tool, and then along with data that we receive back, whether it's survey data or maybe on certain topics. So you'll see a few more.
You get extra credit because of their color printers.
I was gonna say, imagine those schools that have printers. This is
We
really cool about this.
We should get some extra points for that. So the basic services is pretty much black and white. We're just answering the questions with the self-reflection tool. So number percentage of misassigned students, 0%, number percentage of students without access to their own standards aligned materials, 0%, and then number of facilities that didn't meet good repair, 0. So because we met 0 in all of those areas, we met this one standard. So the next one is implementation of state standards, that we measure our progress in implementing the state standards. And this one comes with a nice rating scale that the state supplied for us, so it's so nice of them to supply us with a rating scale and a self-reflection tool. So as a district, we needed to look through all our data and answer several questions. So the first one is our progress in providing professional development in these areas. So just quickly going through, in English language arts, we are at initial implementation. We're just beginning. We had a pilot year last year, and we're going into full implementation this year. English language development, same thing. Mathematics, we have fully implemented our mathematics curriculum. Next generation science standards, we're beginning development. So we're starting with 6th grade at Thurston And the high school is looking at their course sequence, the elementary schools are working with theirs, so we're in that beginning development, same thing with history, social studies. We're just beginning to look at how we're gonna start implementing those standards. Then our progress in making instructional material, or in having instructional materials that are aligned, language arts, English language development, we have purchased those materials. Mathematics, we have them in all classrooms for the instructional materials. Next generation science standards, again, we're starting to implement those at Thurston. And then history, social science, we haven't really looked at, well, the state hasn't approved any of those yet.
That was a question. Obviously, we don't have the standards yet and we barely have them for science, I mean, that's really also, so are we getting dinged because they don't have their act together, or?
No, so we don't really get dinged for the ones that haven't come out yet.
Okay,
So that doesn't really count against us. That will increase as we go through and we start getting those. So same thing in rate the local education agency's progress in implementing policies to identify areas where we can improve how we deliver instruction of the state standards. Again, English language arts, we're implementing that in full this year. We piloted it last year. Math, we have been implementing that. Still have a little bit of work to go as far as looking and revamping what we're doing for math. So that's why that's a 4 rather than a 5. And then next generation science standards and history, social studies, again, we're just in the initial stages there. And then the implementation of, sorry, this is pretty long and dry stuff, but the implementation of the academic standards and these are for our other subject areas. So for career technical education, we're implementing those, but we still have a way to go. We have several pathways, but we're still working on increasing those pathways and providing more access and more opportunities for students. Health education content standards, we are implementing the new sexual health education standards that are mandatory now for this year. Our middle and high school teachers have been trained, and so we are going to be implementing those. And then our physical education standards, we do implement those in the high school because of all of our sports. They aren't completely widespread because some of those standards aren't being covered in some of our sports areas. But we are looking at ways to make sure that we're using the PFT, and our PE teachers are going to be meeting on the professional development day to look at ways that we can use FitnessGram to assure that we're using the results from our physical fitness test to really make sure that our students are getting those standards and are getting what they need for the physical fitness. And then world languages and visual performing arts, we have great programs for both of those and are really implementing the standards for those. And then this would be back to the 15-16 school year. Our success and engage in the following activities with teachers and administrators. Identifying professional learning needs of groups of teachers or staff as a whole. We implemented our professional development survey at the end of 15-16, so looking at finding out what teachers really wanted, and that really helped us to drive our professional development program for this year, and we got great feedback from that.
Is there this standard hops back a year?
And hops back
And
a
that's
year.
their writing of it, okay.
They jump around.
They're just, okay,
yeah,
just wanna make sure that was,
Yeah, we just
that was
answered
not
the
us.
We just answer the questions. And identify professional learning needs of individual teachers. We really did a professional development survey, so it was a little bit more general of what the different departments and overall what we needed. So this year, that would be an area of improvement to really dig down into the individual teachers' needs, and that also goes along with our new evaluation process of setting goals and working with teachers. And then providing support for teachers on standards that they have not yet mastered, and that would go again along with that.
And I was gonna ask you, does this help set goals for the family as this becomes the standard?
Mhm.
And then once all the are state standards ever all implemented? Or are they always changing so much?
We sort of go in a cycle, so as one
As you
goes,
get
we
through, you-
drop off and then we start over
It
again,
seems almost as continuous
continuous.
local control.
It's almost like missing information from the state on this to me, based on what, before the economic standstill.
Mhm.
That it was so on a cycle, that stepped down, so that
Yeah.
you're only dealing with one framework at a time and now we're playing catch up. So to me, if a parent went on and looked at this, they think, well, why aren't they doing everything? Why aren't they at 5s on everything, where really it's.
And one of the things that,
Context is missing, that we can't do it
Yeah.
at once.
and we can add, although they provide us a very small, tiny place, we can add 5,000 characters of explanation, characters, not words, but 5,000 characters, so we
Just
try
run
to,
it all together.
we try to fit in that information. And explain it to the best of our ability to make sure the parents understand
That's
why
good.
certain things are down.
We actually did anything local.
Yeah, yeah. So, parent engagement is another one of our local indicators and something that we're definitely always focused on. We have one of our LCAP goals that really focuses on parent engagement. And we looked at this through a variety of different things, different data sources from our LCAP surveys, our California Healthy Kids survey, and then also just the lists of different parent involvement and parent education opportunities that we had in our LCAP at the different school sites. Our GATE parent meetings, our PTA meetings, our DLAC and ELAC, our school site council meetings. So a lot of different ways that parents can get involved. And in those surveys, parents have stated that they do feel like the communication with the school, like we do have very good parent communication, as well as opportunities for parent involvement. So 75% of our parents said that they did feel that we had really good opportunities for parent involvement. And I think it was about 83% of our parents who said that they felt that we had good homeschool communications. So we are definitely up in the top range of those parent opportunities as well as parent information. So there's the two graphs from our LCAP there, from our LCAP survey, and then the California School Parent Survey, which is the parent portion of the Healthy Kids Survey. And we'll be giving the Healthy Kids Survey again this year, so it's every 2 years, so we'll get some more recent data this year on that parent survey. So with those high numbers, we are reporting that we have met the parent engagement standard. And then school climate, again, we use different data sources, California Healthy Kids Survey, our school climate results, as well as our LCAP survey. And looking at, do students feel safe at school? Overwhelmingly, our students do feel like our schools are safe places. One place that we have really been focused on over the last couple of years is meaningful participation. And so that's something that we will continue to focus on, making sure that our students feel like they have an active voice in making decisions for their school and are active participants. But overall, our schools do feel, our students do feel that they're connected. We have high levels of motivation. And then from the school climate survey, we do have caring staff members. Students feel that there are caring staff members, the staff respects the students, the staff enforces rules. So again, and for this one, we sort of put met, but with an asterisk, because we don't have 2 years of, the state really wants us to look at California Healthy Kids Survey data. We're going to get the California Healthy Kids Survey this year. So we'll have more data on this when it's not a pilot year, when we go into full implementation, we'll be able to provide a second set of California Healthy Kids Survey within the time frame of our LCAP. So we'll be able to give a better thing for, or a better answer for this one.
Every other school's in the same boat, right?
Every school's in the same boat, because everybody only gives the chicks, and some schools don't actually even give the California Healthy Kids Survey, so, so state really wants schools to give that and to use multiple measures, so some schools are actually only reporting off of their own internal data. But luckily, we have a lot of different measures that we're looking at with several different surveys, so we'll be able to report that we do have robust data in the area of school climate.
Before you change that one, so on the column for motivation, they don't do elementary in that one?
They don't ask the question for motivation for elementary students in the California Healthy Kids Survey.
And participation?
Meaningful participation, they ask it across the board. The question is, I believe it's, do you feel like you are able to provide input into making school rules and school policies or something like that? And our kids, it's kind of an odd question, the way that it's worded, and our kids overwhelmingly say it scores very low. So I know Jenny's just drilling it into those kids that they do participate.
That's a dumb question.
But it is kind of a weird question, the way that it's
I'm not
asked.
sure what I meant, like in class and.
Yeah, and it's really very broad and
Yes, you're about the
and
same for the home, you know.
they do.
Parents make the rules, you get to participate.
You participate in
You
your
follow
parents and
rules,
your
that's your
teachers'
participation.
So it is kind of an odd, and we looked at some of our LCAP survey questions too, and with the California Healthy Kids Survey, we don't have the opportunity to really tweak the questions. That's where we have that ability to follow up and get a little bit more specific data with the other surveys that we're giving, so that we're not relying on just that kind of clunky question from the Healthy Kids Survey. But yeah, it is a weird way that they ask it. So for our annual update each year, all local indicators must be met in order for us to be able to show that we've met them all, and then again reported to the local governing board each year. And also at a public meeting, and we've been going over it, the principals will be sharing out their data with their different groups so that we make sure that everybody is aware and understands where we are with each one of these indicators, including the state and local indicators, and that everyone knows where we need to progress and where we're doing well.
So there's no check that box for implementation of state standards, right? You just do
It's
that.
those rating
Those
scales,
ratings
1
and
through
then-
5, and then we can.
They decide, or?
Well, we actually say that we've met it because
We're
we're at least at 3s and 4s with all of the standards that actually
Have they
have
rolled out?
been rolled out, and we're in 1s and 2s, mostly 2s with the standards even that are just coming out. So we're claiming that we have met that standard.
It's kind of awkward.
It's awkward, so we basically rely on the fact that we've met those areas that have actually been implemented by the state. That we're at least 3 through 5 in those areas.
Well, when Jay and we were at a meeting on this, and it really worked, it's really interesting. Met means that you're working on it, not that you got a 5 and everything.
Yeah, it's that we're looking at it, we're progressing towards it.
Nice,
And
right,
we're-
they added 5,000
Oh,
characters.
and you're reporting on it,
Mhm.
right, so that's the.
A big piece of the MET standard is that we are reporting on it, we're sharing the data out with the board, with the public, and with our different stakeholder groups. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing everything perfectly, but it's that we're being open and honest and transparent about our data and really looking at our data and using it to drive what we're doing. So, thank you, and there's again, the dashboard flyer, as well as you can go on and look at the California School Dashboard. Is open and public. And once we have this hopefully approved tonight, we'll have our local indicators up there as well.
Now this will come back into after we
Well, right, so it's not approval, it's presentation.
Presentation.
Right, so the reality is when we go back to the annual update and you approve the LCAP in springtime, we will continue to update you on that, and so there will be another insurance approval. This is draft form, and we'll continue to have multiple iterations from what I can hear. The State Board of Education passed this initially. As we all know, local indicators are local indicators. There's no longer, going in program improvement based off of local indicators necessarily. It's really the intent to be honest with the public as to where you're at and what you use to guide yourself on that, and it's not a grade of A or F. It's simply, are you making an effort towards that? So, as we've said, continuous improvement in my opening comments is always an area we're trying to strive for. When you look at these local indicators, we're always going to be working to improve in those areas. And even in the areas where we don't have any issues with our facilities, that requires constant upkeep. So it's not something that we can simply say, check, we've done that, we're moving on. It is one of the things that you always have to revisit every single year. So you will see this again and again. So we will put a narrative up and we will work on it as a draft, and then we will continue to update the board on that. So.
Any other questions for you? Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Okay, our next information item is presentation on chronic absenteeism. Alicia.
Good evening again, President Shickers and Board. I appreciate the time. I want to tell you a little bit about chronic absenteeism and how that will be impacting our district, how it currently impacts our district. Briefly tonight, this is what I want to talk through. So define it, look at some of our data for both district and sites. I'd like us to think about the implications for us, think about through site responsibilities, district implementation plan, and then receive some feedback this evening. As we begin, I'd like you to take a look at these two districts. District A, District B. This is student self-reported data on the California Healthy Kids Survey. Which district are we?
I can't see the number.
Do you have your packet?
I can see it, right, seriously.
We are district, yes. So this is LAUSD for the year 15-16, District A, largest district in California. We are District B. This is self-reported student data, but it gives an indication, an inkling into a little bit about chronic absenteeism. Statewide, 12% of students are chronically absent. This is out of Attorney General Harris's report. So it's 1 in 8 students. That's, if you think about volume, 1 in 8 students matriculates through California in the United States. So if you think about the number of students that isn't impacted with chronic absenteeism in California, it's dramatic. Nationally, 1 in 4 pre-K through first grade students, so they say TK, so it includes those that are involved in the 2s and 3s and 4s, depending on the state. But students are chronically absent even in the young grades. And that's impacted dramatically when you think about that dropout rates are secure based on data. Data tells us that most students have higher likelihood of dropping out if they're not reading by 3rd grade. So I think it's important that we define the issues, because I think we do need to clarify. Historically, we've spent a lot of time talking about around truancy. Those are unexcused absences. As a reminder, average daily attendance is the percent of students in the classroom that day at any given school, and then also over time as a year progresses. But chronic absenteeism is where we're spending our time tonight. That's both excused and unexcused. Just a quick reminder, this is straight out of Ed Code. These are the reasons that you can be excused. An unexcused absence is everything else. So we're talking about absences that fall into both of these categories. Here's our data over 3 years. Amy Kernan and the tech team put this together for us. I think it's important that we take a minute to look at it. You'll see that we have peaks and valleys over those times. But what you'll notice is there's a lot of students in that category. in those categories. We're talking about students' lives and their ability to achieve well and feel confident in school, which has social emotional impacts. So this is a multi-pronged look. And the reason we thought this infographic would be important is because we're talking about our students' lives. We looked at the data. Mike and his tech team were extraordinary. They took a deep dive into last year's data for us. So the next several slides will be last year's data, but it's split almost 50-50 by gender. This is important because remember that national data I talked to you about, the pre-K through 1 is really at risk. We find that we're at the other end. When you look at our absences, the -2 is preschool, -1 is TK. Here's our range. Another slide that I think is really important that we talk about is this slide. This is our distribution by absence. So chronic absenteeism is 10% or more of the school year. 18 absences is 10% or more of the school year. So when we look along a distribution, we see that little gears turn the big wheel of student achievement, right? And so we believe that the impacts we make by these small changes will impact students' lives immediately because 18 absences is 10%. That is where our chronic absenteeism starts. We also took a deeper dive into what that looks like at each school by ratio. So there are the numbers of, remember this is just for last year, but we wanted to just take a snapshot in time. So when we think about our chronic absentee students, we pulled out some of our vulnerable populations. So you can see that we have a lot of work to do in this area. For example, Irene will be bringing this to her special education PLC, and they plan to do deep dives and look at this data and dive into the reasons, and so design remedies for students based on their analysis of the data. I'd like to look again. Here's our secondary sites. Here's Thurston and the high school with their vulnerable populations. I do think the next two slides are very interesting. I think that common sense tells us this, but I do really want to acknowledge again Mike Morrison and his department by really diving deeply into GPA. So this slide is our non-chronic absenteeism students by GPA, but yes?
No, say
Okay, so these are GPAs here, so you can look at the percentages. So students that are not chronically absent, 1 in 5 has straight A's. But think about the headwind that comes with not being in school every day. So essentially missing 2 or more days a month. What does the headwind do? It knocks down the percentages in every single category. Our largest range is a C average. So when we compare the two, we have straight A's, we have C average. Common sense tells us that, but it's reflected in our data. Again, this is just for last year. So I gave you a lot of different looks at the data. But what we feel that's important to do is we wanted our teams to design systems at their sites that were meaningful. We also wanted to attach it to the their safe school plan, so it was a plan that was embedded at their sites already. Mike Morrison and Mike's tech team and the instructional services tech team want to work together to design some early warning systems so we can identify students ahead of time and using our ARIES analytics. So we'll be spending time in principal meetings. The next two slides are out of Attorney General Harris's report that she has put out the last several years. When we build an MTSS system, thinking through that pyramid, we just like this because they're really good suggestions in here. But what we know is that when you recognize students, when we have systems in place to identify students, check on them. Make sure that their absences are not social emotional related so we can provide immediate supports for them. When we embed a larger system around support for students, we can find success. Here's another way of looking at it, but we've started that work around engaging school climate, identifying positive relationships. We want to monitor our data. That's for us to design good systems so our sites can be nimble and supportive to get out and identify students early rather than doing autopsy day right at the end of the year. So for us, I felt it was important for us to bring this data forward to you. Partially because we've spent time in the past looking at truancy data, right, which is all unexcused. But bottom line is, if you're not in class, you don't have opportunities to learn. So we wanted to bring forward this data, kind of look at it all the way around, and our principals and their teams will bring forward recommendations to you in November. Here's our initial action steps. I want to leave you with this. So we've done work in these 5 areas so far. We've communicated with our principals. As a reminder, and we knew this was an issue for us, so when we created that dashboard video last year and sent it out to our families, that video said that we were going to be focusing on chronic absenteeism this year and systems around that. We want to make sure though that we communicate, and then we over-communicate the importance of being in school. So our teams are supporting sites with those processes now that we'll bring forward to you. So I've thrown a lot of information at you. What questions?
One last question, this track back to every student every day. It really does, checking on them, if they're not there, you're noticing they're not there.
It came up in regular conversation, especially at the high school, where they were struggling with students not being there, and they said attendance, and I think Dr. Keller can speak to it. And one of the conversations that continued to bubble up was we have to get a handle on our students' attendance, and we need to kind of look at our current systems, look how we can continue to improve them, or just simply make sure we're implementing them with fidelity and have good conversations about that. So. The chronic absenteeism definition is new. It's something the state has obviously been working on and working through. It's changed iterations over time. I think at one point it was 15% of the school year. The state dropped it to 10%, and which is a lot of days when you really factor it all in. So that's why we felt it's important to get it in front of you prior to even the dashboard having the rates on there. As clearly the state's still working through their data issues to get a metric up there, but wanted to give you an idea of where we're headed, because this is a thing that on the very first couple of months of school is going to be an important message that we can say.
So when you say focus on early attendance, do you mean elementary attendance, or do you mean early in the school year to get a handle on it, or both?
Both, yes. So the recommendation from the state is that they mean the early attendance in terms of the TKs to first grade to make sure that we develop good habits, thereby training families to get their kids to school on time. That is not necessarily reflected in our data. However, it is slightly, if you remember, we do have some spikes in our early grades. So we want to make sure that yes, we're developing good habits, but also, in addition to that, get out early with our message around we're creating a new system, here are the levers in place that will support your student to make sure your student comes to school every day. Part of that is our independent study, so we'll be able to provide options for families that do leave. We will have an opportunity to make sure their children still stay connected to school somehow when they leave.
So I guess I being absent from school just isn't an option at my house, because it's their job, right? Unless they're absolutely dripping disgusting things out of their nose and burning a fever. But now that Claudia's no longer at TOW to guilt the parents, I mean, little kids can't get to school unless they either get on the bus with parents, yes, I do talk like this, or the parents,
drive them and get them there on time. So do we have, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna call it a stick. Because I can't blame, you know, a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old
No.
whose mom or dad or dad says, oh, we need some alone, we need some me time. I'm like, no, you don't.
You hug it home, yep, hug it out, yeah.
I mean,
No, we're in agreement, and that would be an inappropriate conversation to have with a young child. That would not be supportive to them, they would not feel good about coming to school,
Right.
that's an adult conversation.
so
But it's important on the adults to be checking
we will have something in place when a kid gets to a certain point that we say, we
Yes.
reach out to the parent
yes,
and say, this is not cool, because
Yes.
you can't, if you're in a workplace and you miss 10% of work, you're gonna be bad at your job. I mean, it's just,
yeah, we've only really talked about
I'm sorry, this is
the
this is the
academic
that just
impacts,
chaps me
but
beyond.
socially, it's really hard on kids to be away for that
Yes.
period of time, yes.
What do we do currently if we see a child that's missing blood? What's our current procedure?
Every school does it a little differently, but we really wanna tighten that up and be very explicit about who does what, and that's what we plan to bring to you in November.
And the high school is not just, it's period absences, isn't it also, not just school days? So students who don't come back after lunch, or students who miss first period regularly.
And we did take a look at those. I did not bring you that data, but there is tardy data. Mike and his team dove deep around tardy data as well. And our chronic absenteeism data, they tend to be tardy more.
It would
As
seem
well.
that it's something that definitely needs to draw parents in early as we start tackling this. Because I do see, even the high school kids, it's the parents' responsibility to make sure that their students attend school and to communicate the message that you need to be there. That is important, I mean, maybe that's dropped off in some respect, because maybe we haven't addressed it, I don't mean, you know, no one's fault particularly, but maybe we just started assuming that parents had that same idea from 20 years ago, that there was value in coming to school every day. So that, because that's the same way that I am, that Ed said, I mean, you go to school, that is your work, I mean, that's what you do, and
Well, and to be fair, a lot of our parents went to school in systems like I did, who really cared about just the unexcused absences, right? So we have statewide shifts around this thought as well. So that's why I think it's important for us to be a part of this and make system decisions. But yes, I agree,
I mean, you can't, but I guess what I'm trying to say is you can't do it in isolation as the school district, isolated from the families.
Right, it has to be- it has to
You know, that we're gonna then be reaching out and saying, we have a problem here, so we need to solve it.
and here's why we are concerned, because 10% is 10%.
Well, it's like when you look at the GPAs, I mean,
Yeah.
that's, what might those students have achieved if they hadn't had that
They
level
come
of
to school.
absenteeism?
Right, it's essentially about 2 days a month. That's a lot of school to miss.
It is.
Thank you, I mean, I'm sorry, this is a lot to.
I know, I threw a lot at you, but I wanted to kind of take you a 360 view of our
Well, I think
data,
the
so.
data, I mean, the data speaks for itself.
Peggy did that, I mean, I don't know if you knew about it all, but when Dr. Keller had that first meeting on social emotional, and the counselors at both Thurston and the high school mentioned absenteeism as being a problem. And I mean, before that, I had been aware that it was a problem. So it's obviously that school sites, they're focused on it. Or they knew about it.
So now we've aligned our definition to the state's, and we'll move forward.
And you'll bring us a coherent strategy of some sort.
We'll go out and get that.
It's a part of the safe school,
Thank you.
yeah. Thank
In
you.
the meantime, if you need me a mean mom, just let me know, I'd be more than.
We'll go out and pick them up.
Yeah, oh yeah, I got rid of a car.
I care about 6 in my car.
Oh, yeah, you think food.
Okay, now we're ready for our action items. And thank you again, Elizabeth, for the. Our first action item is first reading of board policy. That's a new required policy from the state with a time deadline, right? Right, Dr. Boyer present this.
So we brought you as an action item, whether you determined to take action tonight in decide to forego a second reading is up to the board, but if we didn't put it in action, you wouldn't have the opportunity to do that. So we felt it was imperative that we did that. So with that, the policy is fairly straightforward, and as we are well aware in our current society, suicide is a leading cause of death amongst many of our youth. And this is simply a reiteration of our intent as a school district to provide support in staff development for our staff, specifically around suicide awareness and prevention for teachers, school counselors, and other district employees, as well as strategies to address the needs of our students. What will accompany this will be an administrative notification that will have the specific actions that our staff will take, and what the expectation will be from the administrative side if it approves the policy. So I think it would need to be done kind of a two-step deal. If the board wants to decide to do it tonight, but I'm open for any questions.
Public comment on this
Public
item.
comment?
We have questions?
Well, I was gonna ask if you moved it, if we can move it to take action tonight and not second reading, we have to say it differently.
Well, just,
Maybe
we
we
could,
could
we can
actually
wait.
set the motion.
If we part of the motion.
Okay.
What is the actual?
Do you want it as a second
What is the deadline?
No.
There's, the deadline is just for the next school year, so
The next school year, okay.
we're okay. If it waits till next meeting, that's perfectly fine. But it's up to you, to the board. It was something I thought was fairly self-explanatory and important for us to continue to move forward with, but we're fine waiting.
Do we need to make some sort of motion before we talk about it?
Questions first and then a motion and discussion. So are there any other questions? So a motion.
I move to approve it tonight.
Okay, the second. Is there any second to that? Is there any discussion?
I think it's straightforward and I think we should move forward. I'm going to approve it tonight, but in general, I really like to have the reading agreement and action.
Of course, in this instance, like I said, that's a board interest. For timeline wise, it's for the start of the school year is our intentionality. Dr. Keller worked over the summer with staff to help create this along with the potential administrative regulation that we will continue to work with our staff on to roll forward. But clearly timeline is not something that, if we decided to wait, we're okay. This is one of those things that I believe firmly is important for us as a board, as a school district to take a stance on right away. In most other cases, I will continue to bring them in a first and second. This is one that just really stands out as my important for students, so.
I agree, because I think
We have done that rarely as far as waiving the second reading. But I think that because it was agendized and it's posted as the potential to do that, then there is public notification that we might do that. So I think it's a responsibility to the public, if that's what we do.
And then I think that it's great to start the year with this in place versus the meeting versus the vote.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Our next action item is approval of renewal of professional services agreement with American Microimaging Inc., the paperless company for the 2017-18 document scanning, imaging, and shredding services at a cost not to exceed $50,000.
So this is, we had an original agreement in 2016 that ran from June 16 through the June of 19. We are continuing that agreement and we are adding a component of shredding. The challenge of bringing the documents back after they've scanned them to then hire somebody else to then shred them, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. So, this would make the person to my right a very happy person.
One-stop shopping.
So one-stop shopping is pretty good.
It's kind of like J-Pro.
And what we are doing is moving towards a digital format for a lot of our archive materials, which is freeing up a lot of space in our warehouse. So,
How far along are
How much more?
so the expert,
We started on student records, and we had originally started with 3 different departments, and we decided to compartmentalize and focus strictly on student records right now. So we're moving forward with those. We've had a fairly large batch done the first time. We've had a staff member come in over the summer to start cleaning out records, and we have a very large batch to send once this is approved. So we're moving along quite well now.
Are we to like 1930?
We've done 1930s through 1940 something, and then we did a 5-year scan more recently, 10 years back, because that's the records the registrar accesses the most.
Oh, right.
So we went with what she uses the most and then started freeing up space otherwise, and then we're just moving forward with the years.
Sounds great. Any public comment on this item, are there any other board questions? So motion please. So moved. Second. Ed and Carol, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
We don't have to worry about getting wet, we don't have to worry about silverfish eating them. Yes.
Silverfish.
Rats were getting the boxes.
It's much easier to find, yeah.
Nightmare.
Thank you. They were very happy.
Yes, thank you.
Next action item is approval of independent contractor agreement with Jennifer McLuhan for the 2017-18 school year and an amount not to exceed $12,950.
Thank you. So board members that joined the NGSS implementation team last year certainly have experienced our work with Jen McLuhan. She's extraordinary. She thankfully agreed to join us again as a professional expert to continue to support the high school with their pathways and continue to advise Thurston when needed. She does serve in a role of consultant. In addition to these 7 days, we call her a lot. Me and my multiple personalities call her a lot. She provides a lot of additional support for us, so we're grateful for your willingness to consider this contract for this year.
Public comment or questions? Motion please. So moved. Second. Any discussion?
She's awesome.
She is. Yeah, she is.
Special person.
She's awesome. I mean, that's her mental health services part. I appreciate it as well.
Just generalize.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. Our next item is approval to renew a contract with Hanover Research for the 2017-18 school year and an amount not to exceed $37,595.
So, thank you. We would like to bring forward a renewal for Hanover. They've done extraordinary work for us. As a reminder, last year, they dove in deep with us with our parents with GATE. They provided in-depth interviews and best practices, and they did a full records review for our GATE documents. We'll bring that forward to you as in October. But upcoming, we'd like to do work in our math pathways. We have our school climate survey, our LCAP survey. We have a lot of work that we would like to continue to do with them. So we bring this forward for your consideration.
Comment? Board question? Motion please. So moved. Second. Any more discussion?
Again, worth, it's real solid data that we can use to inform decisions. That is so appreciated.
I was appreciative that you did it before, and I would hope you would continue that. You made some modifications or adjustments when what they came up with wasn't precisely what you felt was a good fit for us. So that's important to me, that you have your input into it and not just accept what they bring forward, even though they do good work. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Our next action item is agreement for the services of Learning for Living Inc. at a cost of $5,000. And this is.
Me.
Sorry. At the bottom, I didn't.
So this is Phil, who is coming to do our staff at the schools. And not to be forgotten is the staff at the district office. And for us to go out and to attend the school site versions of this workshop, having sat through it and having leadership team sit through it, would put us in the middle of a school site situation, and that's what we want to not be doing. We want the sites to be able to work amongst themselves with their school sites and to allow the district office to have a similar opportunity. So we're looking to do a day at the end of September with the district office staff. Again, just walking through that as we, again, with relationships being a big focus for us, this is an opportunity for that. So I appreciate your consideration.
Public comment? board questions?
I actually do have a question. I think it's a great idea. Each site is individual. Each site has its own culture. How then do we create an overall district culture without stepping on the toes? Because I think looking at things that we're trying to do, TK 12,
Right.
preschool 12, we do need to have a coherent idea or,
Right.
goal. And so I'm just interested, will he help us do that, being respectful of each site's individuality?
Right, I think the first step for the school sites is really to spend that time with each other, to break down barriers that may exist, to surface issues, and to really establish those strong connections. And that is what really starts to bind and build culture. And a positive culture creates a positive school climate for students. And that's really what the end all be all of these conversations is that ultimately research shows that the stronger staff relationships are with each other, the better staff to student relationships are, which has a direct correlation to student achievement. So what we want when we're working with our principals to continue to do is look for ways that we will articulate this, TK through. And it's not another program, it's a way of working together. And I think that's the key. We do a lot of different programs that support, trying to build relationships with students and with staff. This is just another way by which we can establish those so that we can move forward as a whole group. And to your point, what we want them to be able to do, and I think what you're hearing a little bit from staff, and just talking to Mr. Duddy this morning a little bit, is he's also trying to find ways to embed strengths in with his staff. And we have that going on at the middle school. So those will be conversations that we'll continue to articulate as we move forward. We want everyone to be speaking the same language, which is something we've heard a little bit about, right?
Yeah, that's actually, the shared language is so key.
Correct. So the book that Phil has written that we've shared with the leadership team and several other staff helps provide some common language. And you're right, every school has a different culture, a little different vibe to it. However, the nitty gritty of it is as they bond together, that's universal.
So commonalities become much more.
Right. So that when we go to institute changes or challenges, they're a tighter knit group, and when you go to change, the more cohesive you are as a group, the easier change is. So, and the easier it is to continuously improve as a group. So we're working on that, and that's again why I spent the time to create kind of the 3 areas of focus that are simple, and how everything falls underneath that. As Principal Sullivan and I were just talking about the other day, is this makes it easier to help organize some of these things that we're doing K-12 into very simple statements that we can follow. So it's an area that we're always looking to be better at.
Yeah, so you're not, I guess when I heard you speak about culture, though, it's not like we're trying to take one culture and everyone's that, we're just trying to get everyone connected in their culture that they're creating in that they have at their school site, not trying to make them all look the same.
But the shared language is around the
Shared
importance of culture
yes.
and having a positive culture for students and using that language of, and one thing I heard today a little bit, when I was at the corporal bias training, was just talking about standard kind of expectations for students, K-12, TK-12, right? Is that we really need to focus on that common language with students so that it's not confusing to them. So when they go from one, maybe even classroom teacher to another, we use similar language so that the student understands what they're being asked to do. And the same as we go from middle into high school as well. So we don't want it to be different from classroom to classroom in terms of expectations for students. We want to hold that as an important thing that we all focus on.
Any other questions? Motion,
Carol, I just wanted to make an observation that I think that this is just taking this another step forward with the central office specifically. That when we brought PLCs into the central office in different groups and expanded that from school sites, and it was really appreciated as far as letting them get together in their groups. And then we did that further with the cross training of the positions. so that they could have a better understanding and also then fill in for someone. This seems to me to take it that next step of maybe making it more cohesive, so that they now can be more, total group and understand what the health is. But I know even before also what we did was an idea to get, when it started, but having people from central office go out for things like Great Across America. And they really liked doing that because they were always down here working, they weren't out where the kids were. And so even though that was a small and simple thing, it made a connection. It also made them feel that they had value to the school site to be asked to come and to do that. So I support it so much for that reason, as that they just don't feel that they're performing functions here. And I'm not talking about people, but that are involved, like in instruction, because they have more of a relationship with what's going on the school sites. But some others don't, so I think it'll really have value. So, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries by vote. Next action item, approval to authorize district representatives for the school facilities program under the State Allocations Board and Office of Public School Construction.
President Vickers, this is just to update our state allocation board and Office of Public School Construction representatives. I have always been on that list, but currently it's Dr. Smith and Dean West. So we're gonna update it with Dr. Gloria and our new Director of Facilities, Ryan Zeta. And with her approval, we'll be able to continue signing the numerous forms associated with our school facility projects.
Great. Public comment or questions? Motion to vote.
Second.
No, any discussion? Thank you for updating this. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries by vote. It's important to have the right names.
Yeah.
One out of three,
For all of those
That's what you say.
boards. Okay, the next action item, approval of independent contract with Vernon Benefits Insurance Services to provide consulting and brokerage support for district employees' health benefits for October 1, 2017 through September 30, 2018, with a not to exceed amount of $60,000. And that's, who's?
That would be me,
Yes.
yes.
Oh, there's three names down here, so pick one of those.
This is a renewal, proposal of a renewal of our contract with our broker. Last year, 16-17 was the first year we had this broker, and all the feedback has been very positive. And in fact, the cost of this contract is a drop in the bucket compared to the savings that they negotiated for our health insurance benefits this year. So it's well worth it.
Any public comment? Or questions? Motion please, so moved. Getting there. Any more discussion? Did you find that? I mean, is that why we have such a?
We actually went through an RFP process and we interviewed, I think, about 3 to 5 consultants.
Good change.
And yeah, it was very positive.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries by vote. Our next item are board member requests, items for future meetings, requests for information and general comments.
Thank you for put together the workshop. Very productive last week. Sorry.
It's still summer.
It's still summer.
Let's see, I guess I have a request. I've heard from several parents and students about seating at the high school during lunch, that there aren't enough seats for people, and so the kids are wondering about coming back, where they're gonna sit, and I guess there's, different little hierarchies.
There
Anyway,
are.
my request is that we get the rest of the tables in that central area, so, and kind of look that over, and I talked to Dr. Goldman about that. Look over if we have enough, go and look and see if there are kids that don't have a place.
So somebody to just look at that,
That's
as an age-old, that has been every year forever.
Like when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And I've also heard that,
Yeah.
when I've asked kids, and they're like, no, there's plenty of space, you just go to a wing room, library, or gym, or like there are some kids, and there's some kids who feel like they don't want to
They want to listen.
And it's almost like you need mentorship, or that's more like every student every day, that's why are they sitting on the wall by themselves, or why are they, there's something.
They bought more tables last year than we
And the
Right.
So
Right.
you've got
Yeah,
to
it's more-
They'd like them in the
more
central
at the end.
area, not around a corner somewhere.
And they put them in the grass when they want.
I don't think they wanna put them in the grass.
They do too many events.
No, that there's
So,
ones,
one-
it's just not shaded.
I'll let Jeff
Oh, it's
speak,
not shaded.
can you speak
Yeah.
to
So.
what's coming?
Member Perry, in regard to the quad area, we're actually gonna look at that in its entirety. We're gonna begin with walks with Bob Bellinger at the high school to look at that seating area, but we're also going out to issue a request for proposals for architect services related to the restroom concession building at the stadium. Also to include analysis of the quad area and the admin office for more efficiencies and improved student and staff flow. So that'll be included in that, and so I'll put more on the update to the board this week, but we were already on top of this.
You can't make that office any more efficient. That front office at the high school is perfect.
Maybe one more door.
That's wonderful, that's great news. I was, thinking of the new freshman coming, one of the students that I spoke with, as a freshman, she went out, and was all excited and went to sit at a table and was told, you can't sit here, this is, some senior girl table or something. And being kind of a shy person, then she didn't really try to go out and sit somewhere again. And when we talk about all the social emotional needs, when we talk about the reasons that kids don't wanna come back to school, kids that I spoke to, a lot of it was being worried socially.
One of the challenges we have with that space is it is somewhat of a confining space to have access for 1,000 seats in one spot. One, we wanna verify that it's a safe opportunity for our
Right.
students, so that's one of the concerns we currently have with the way the planners are laid out and some of those other issues. And then clearly shade is a challenge, putting them on the grass. ASB utilizes that space quite a bit for games. And so, again, talking with Bob over the last, and this was a topic that came up last year, I remember specifically PTA actually brought it up, that they were concerned about the lack of space, not just there, actually campus-wide. There was not a whole lot of space, so we did buy some more tables and we'll continue to do that. Been talking with Dr. Allen about that. He wants to make sure that we fit that need, while at the same time, safety is of utmost importance to us, so that if we can't put too many students in a space that we can't manage in a safe manner. And so we'll look at that, and as Jeff mentioned, though not an immediate solution to that, we'll look at some of our common spaces, especially with those planter wells, which we know when they fail, and they have failed in terms of their water treatment, they lead to all sorts of challenges for us. So we would like to potentially get rid of those and create something a little bit different. So we'll look forward to that and bring that to the board for our.
I appreciate it, it's all in the works.
Right, and it is, and it's, I don't know, those are all those issues, I think, but maybe perhaps what we're doing now with incoming freshmen, like recruit, that perhaps that also will reflect with an emphasis on every student every day. Because then if they've been in school here for a number of years, they, you would hope that they would have a group. So that, and then of course, we want to address that more with new students into the district, but then if we have that emphasis, it would seem that there would be adults who would be aware that there was a child that was struggling with finding friends. So that it should tie together, not just a table issue, but actually building that, I think that's what you're doing. But it made me think of something really funny. When I first subbed to the district, I just had a secondary credential, I got the other ones later. So I subbed at the high school, and they told me, when you go into the faculty lounge, do not sit down, because you're gonna sit in somebody's seat, and they all have their own seat, and you don't, and especially with this, the good old guys group, you do not sit in their seats.
I had that when I was a speech pathologist there, I didn't know.
So adults do the same thing, as far as you can't sit here. Anyway, I would just like if you have any information to date on what you call walk-in enrollment, in other words, enrollment that wasn't carried over from last year.
Right, so we'll put that together for you. The sites have still been working through processing students in and out. We have what's called AIR, which is our online enrollment system. I looked at it just this morning.
Did you fill out yours yet?
I did. Chris got my data confirmation sheet
Just checking.
in her own hands the other day. Didn't want to have a repeat of last year. But yeah, I will be happy to. I think for us, it would be best to wait a little bit more time as they process people, so that numbers don't fluctuate too significantly. But what I can tell you as a theme is, we're still waiting for more enrollment at the elementaries. They're a little lower than we had targeted, once again, and we continue to see a little bit of an increase at the middle school. And as Jenny likes to say, I told you so. But it's not as much as she thinks, because I do math. So, again, we look at
I know
our
it's early,
we look at our projections and try to see where we're at, and so based off where we staff, we still have some, quite a bit of room, so we're looking at that, and the high school is basically dead on as to where we had them. They're only 2 students away from what we had them right now, so again, we know there'll be some students still moving in and out as we process students through some of the
Some schools have already started. So when kids started at other schools, did they have to then, do they remove themselves from here to start like at a private school that we wouldn't know there would be a transfer for? Or do they just start there and then
They're supposed to, and we typically will get a records request, which will signal that there are new students, so we'll get a fax, a records request from the receiving district that will process that, and then as required by education code, we're required to code where they go, whether it's private school, within the state, out of state, moving from school, whatever it might be, and we have to code that, because that all feeds into the information system, because each student has their unique identification number, so.
And the only thing that made me think that there was one family that said to me, well, I'm glad they're starting so early just in case we don't like it, we can come back. So it's like, well then how do you know if they're here, like where they are?
Yeah, they'll
Because
just
they're kind of
know.
over there, but they're keeping one foot,
Yeah.
just in case.
Yeah, so sometimes we will receive that, we won't have known, and so that's why there's a little bit of, Capistrano Valley, I think, started today, that's their first day. So we may get some requests for records here, if anybody decided to move to wherever it might be. So a lot of school districts are starting this week, so we'll see a little more potentially, so.
I wanted to say thank you for the work you did last week with the strengths, and that was really interesting, and I think so such a focus district-wide for us right now, and I think it's very positive. I've seen things like this start before, and then they don't follow through. They just go for a little while, and then they fall apart, and I really feel that you're making an emphasis, and by having all of us do it, it sort of, in my mind, it gives us a really better understanding of what it is going to do and what benefit, how you see it working. So I appreciate that, and the time that you spent doing that. I just wanted to make one comment about reading. I read it twice somewhere recently, that the federal level has 6 areas that you must concentrate on that are not discrimination, that you would be guilty of discriminating. California adds 13 categories to that. And so it just to know that when we look at all the things with dashboard and what the state does, that when the state of California gets involved in things, they make it more complicated. And so we have I think at least 4 or 5 of those have the word gender in front of them. So that, there's a lot of responsibility when you're dealing with a broad population of things that we need to be on top of. That's it for me. Motion to adjourn. So moved. Our next meeting is Tuesday, September 12th at 6 p.m.